It's been a blessing and a curse. Eat, sleep, breathe, animation. I've always had stories and projects in mind.
And one of those personal projects is Deep Rooted. Why is it not an official Blender movie? Because it's so good.
I've got the habit now of spending enough time up front to establish whether or not I believe in the thing enough and whether it's achievable enough.
How much is made using geometry nodes? Because I imagine there's a lot.
There's an awful lot. It's the tool that I've always wanted. Like, I was really excited to be in Blender. I don't think, should I do a personal project or not? I don't think I would have got the opportunities in work that I've had. People only ever really want to talk about the personal projects. I don't even really show professional work. We're seeing big studios closing all over the place. There's going to be gaps for little vendors who employ generalists. Even if you want to animate, if you can supplement it with a little bit of rigging knowledge or problem-solving ability, it'll just make you way more valuable to a team.
Oh, hey Duncan.
Hey Jamie.
Sorry Duncan, I was just doing a funny face then.
We're doing your thespian warm-up routine.
Yeah, it's very important when you do these things every day.
Well, you don't want cramps halfway through, do you?
Duncan Rudd, welcome to the VFX Process.
Hi Stephen, hi Jamie.
Just to give you a quick overview, we're just going to be chatting mainly about Deep Rooted, which is incredible. Of course, you've had a big response from it. We love it. I was wondering, why is it not an official Blender movie? Because it's so good. Probably ask yourself that, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, I knock on their door every day, so.
Hey, you've got it. I mean, it's so good. It looks so legit.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, I mean, I do know some of the guys at Blender just from making a nuisance of myself at Beacon and stuff like that. So, never say never. It'd be great to work with those guys. Love the stuff they do.
Brilliant. Duncan, can you just give us an introduction, your name, who you are, and a little bit about what you do?
Sure thing. I'm Duncan Rudd. I'm based in Manchester in the UK, and I sort of fell into animation a little bit accidentally, but I've been doing this for quite a long time now, hence the white beard and the lack of hair on my head. It's been a weird kind of journey. I didn't anticipate being an animator. It's been a blessing and a curse. It's like eat, sleep, breathe, animation. Yeah.
Where did you first pick up a piece of 3D software? What was it like, and why did you do that?
I was at university in 97. It was a TV and film course. So I was making a stupid little student film, like
everyone does.
Yeah, about two guys smoking weed on the couch. And nice. I wanted this sequence where you would follow the smoke down into the lungs. So stupid, but I'd seen Fight Club intro, the Dust Brothers intro. I was like, oh yeah, that it needs a bit of that in there. So I tried to think what it looked like, but it was a thing. Yeah, it wasn't a good first experience. It probably put me off for a while. I ended up going down to London after uni, and I got a job down there doing the live scoreboards. So you'd sit in the broadcast truck and update the scoreboards at Wimbledon or at the golf tournament or whatever, which I was terrible at, to be honest. But the best thing about that place was that they had PCs with 3ds Max at the time. I would go in at weekends and read the 4 volumes of the user manual sat on the shelf, and you'd sit there and read it because there was nothing online.
Yeah.
I managed a couple of years in London, and I realised that I like Manchester. So moved back up north, got a job for a little video company that were making corporate videos, and they wanted to push animation as one of their kind of service offers. And I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. Again, it was just that problem-solving mentality of promising something and then thinking, well, no choice now, got to figure it out.
We find that from many people that we speak to. You get an opportunity, you say yes, and then find a way.
So yeah, I stayed at that company for about 5 years. That was when I went freelance, and I've been dead lucky, to be honest. I got a really nice semi-permanent gig with Eurosport. It gave me the confidence to sort of jump ship from a permanent role. I did a stint at Aardman, which was amazing.
I was going to say, I've worked at Aardman for a couple of years and I moved in. I saw that on your website.
The talent that's around you there it can be intimidating, but it's inspiring as well.
Definitely.
Look to the side and you go, oh my God.
Yeah.
since then, I've been doing a lot of work for TV commercials, advertising, keeping the lights on. And that's kind of when the personal projects really started to become a bigger part of what I've been spending my time on.
And one of those personal projects, which we're going to get into, is Deep Rooted, which is an incredible short film made in Blender. Am I right in saying that there's other Rudds involved? Because we see on the credits there's like I think it's Erin Rudd, art director.
Erin is my daughter. She is 17 now. She's bright as a button. She's like amazing. But one of the things she brings is like she'd come on from college or school and stand behind me and look at what I'm doing and just be like, yeah, that's not right, Dad. And she's just got this laser guided critical eye, and she'll just say, no, that needs to change. The credits are real, like an acknowledgement of the time she spent kind of just keeping me honest.
Over your shoulder going, change that, that's not good.
Yeah, there'd be a few shots where she's like, nah, doesn't make the cut.
It's a big thing to take on, of course, with family especially.
It is. I've always had stories and projects in mind. And for a lot of years, I was really frustrated because, like everybody's, when you don't know what's involved, your ambition is way bigger than what you can actually achieve. So I've got like hard drives and sketchbooks full of projects that I've started and ground to a halt. It's only been recently where I think my skills have come up to a level where I can execute, and the scope of my ambition has come down to where they meet. So Deep Rooted is my 4th film. I've got the habit now of like spending enough time up front to establish whether or not I believe in the thing enough and whether it's achievable enough. I don't think, should I do a personal project or not? It's going to come out one way or another. And, you know, if I didn't do it, I don't think I would have the skill set that I have. And I don't think I would have got the opportunities in work that I've had, because people only ever really want to talk about the personal projects. I don't even really show professional work.
So what was it about this then that was the starting point?
I had a really nice bike commute to work for about 6 months through the woods, and it was such good thinking time. You weren't worrying about traffic and all that stuff. And I think it was just that, going through the woods for 2 hours every day. I'd happily spend time in a virtual space like this as well.
What happens after those thoughts go on in your head? Do you take it to a sketchbook, straight into 3D? What happens after that?
Often I'll jump straight into 3D and then go, oh, you shouldn't be doing this yet. You know, give it a chance. The best thing that works for me, if I can be disciplined enough, is to just let it sit for a month or two. If I'm still thinking about it after a couple of months, then I know it's something that's got its teeth into me and is worth kind of spending some time on. And I'd also just started to become aware of Blender a little bit. I'd been thinking, well, a forest in Maya, which is what I was using at the time, I wasn't confident that I could do it in Maya, basically. So I was sitting on it, I guess. And then when I started to see all the geometry nodes stuff come out in Blender, I guess with version 3, this is what I need to get it done.
Visually, it's stunning. So I'm just curious to where the design of, you know, the shapes, is it a Duncan thing? I imagine you've got that kind of thing integrated in your work anyway.
A lot of the style comes from my own limitations, really. Googly eyes and big shapes is kind of my sandbox. So I work within that, really. A lot of the look, I would say, I develop in 3D as I go. I kind of try and lean into what the software's good at, what it can do for me, and go on a little exploratory journey. I tend to make like a vertical slice of the film first because it gets me excited about it. It gives you the chance to kind of show people. If other people are excited, that's a good sign at that point. So yeah, a lot of the look comes from Blender, from EEVEE and what it can and can't do.
Picking up a new software, Blender, before you started, you were diving into geometry nodes. How did you approach the whole like pipeline and project management for this in a new software with new tools?
Yeah, I was worried you were going to ask me about that. It looks like a mess. I set out at the start knowing that I was going to make stuff at the beginning that by the end of it, I would do completely differently.
That's with every project and everything.
And I also knew that Blender was changing fast. I didn't want to paint myself into a corner with a pipeline that meant I couldn't always be using the latest version and all that stuff. and I wasn't going to use any add-ons because, I wanted to kind of see what the software could do vanilla. Geometry nodes wasn't that unfamiliar to me. I've used those kinds of systems in other softwares. And I've done quite a bit of programming. So that was actually the easy way in, the friendly way in to Blender, if I'm honest. That was the bit that immediately made sense.
How much is made using geometry nodes? Because I imagine there's a lot going on. There's, the environments, the trees, the floor cracking.
There's an awful lot.
But if that was your kind of, tipping point of like, oh, great, Blender's the software for this. It's got these tools that I'm fairly familiar with. It's quite exciting to start at that point.
Yeah, it's the tool that I've always wanted in other softwares, and there's been promises here and there of it. Like Ice was great in Softimage till Autodesk killed it. And then there was Fabric Engine. I don't know if you remember that one, but it was a standalone ecosystem that would plug into different softwares, and you could write code and use nodes to build graphs. That seemed to be the answer, and then it wasn't. So yeah, geometry nodes was like, finally, this is the thing. I can make a forest now. I don't have to place everything by hand. And yeah, lots of the film relies really heavily on geometry nodes. All, like you say, all the scattering of the trees and the ground cover, all the water and the interaction with the rocks and all that stuff. The eyes of the character, a lot of the wings and the clouds. Yeah, a lot. I've kind of never been averse to jumping ship and changing software. It's a cliche, but it's just different buttons that do the same job, really. It's just a bit of time you need to learn which is the equivalent button in the new UI.
The geometry nodes and building everything was, exciting and maybe not your biggest technical challenge. But what were some of the challenging aspects and elements of creating Deep Rooted that you can remember?
Motivation is always the main challenge. There'll be times when you just want to do anything but look at that bloody thing again. But it's a keeper as a project when you get through those periods and find yourself wanting to do it again. In terms of technical challenges, I guess it was all challenging in some way. Every day was like a different thing of stop, let's figure out how this works in Blender. It became intuitive, and I don't know if that's the software itself or just the wealth of stuff that's out there now in the community that are all just so kind of willing to help and point you in the right direction and just really encouraging. It never feels like you're struggling on your own with a problem. Like, I was really excited to be in Blender.
And you mentioned it was EEVEE. Was EEVEE used for the whole short?
Yeah.
And what was the decision for that?
I just like the way it looks. I knew I wanted to use some volumes to kind of give the depth to the forest. Cycles gets pretty slow, or it did back then anyway, with volumes. If you want a nice clean image, it's going to take some time. So I knew I kind of wanted to render the shots as I went, and the longest frame time was probably 30 seconds. That was great. There was a point, I guess, maybe 3.5 or 3.6, where they brought in the ray tracing, like the global illumination in EEVEE. I had to stop upgrading at that point because it looked too different to everything else I'd already done.
Didn't it? Yeah.
So, and it looks great. The new stuff looks great too. But that was the point where I was like, okay, I need to stick with this version now and finish the thing.
At university or college, setting render, waiting 10 hours and coming back. What's it like as a filmmaker to be able to kind of see the final image kind of on screen while you're working?
It's amazing. It's a horrible feeling coming back after the weekend and looking at your shot, and it's like there's a massive shadow right across the focal point, or stuff that you just couldn't see until you rendered it. Classic stuff, but it's really demoralizing. So there's that, but also just being able to compose your shots and use shadows and use focus to make your decisions as you're setting things up is really kind of freeing. It removes a lot of the need to kind of think 4 steps, 5 steps ahead while you're animating and stuff. You can check things a lot sooner in the process and not just guessing about what might come later. It really enables you to kind of use more of the filmmaking tools that you would see on a set if you were, setting up lights and positioning actors and stuff.
What was one of the most kind of complicated and most difficult scenes or shots to create?
Yeah, there's a shot with the river like draining down and there's a frog that jumps. So that shot took a long time. Getting the timing to feel right and getting the water to drop down at the right pace with the camera as well. And then the lighting on that one is in a kind of a transitional phase where we're going from the nice saturated bright forest into the bleaker colour palette. Yeah, I'm not really sure why, but that shot got animated a few times. And that was definitely one where Erin had come home from school and I'd be like, look, it's done. And she'd be like, that ain't done.
Oh, really? I can see why she deserves the credit at the end then.
Oh, she deserves the credit for sure. Yeah.
You know, texturing wise, is it all done within Blender? Are they painted on geometries? What's the texturing process like for you?
A load of it is kind of procedural stuff. And that's, you know, one of the things that I really love about Blender is that you can kind of manipulate the UVs in the shader nodes and do things that are, to me, more like traditionally what you would do in games. Whereas in Maya, you kind of lay out your UVs and then you put your texture on, and there isn't an intermediate step where you manipulate those UVs to get certain effects. So yeah, that was great to, you know, to be able to do some of that stuff that I've always sort of looked at Unreal in games and thought, that looks cool. I wish I had a bit of that.
There's a particular shot that I just love visually. I think it was the big tree with the pink hair as such. Just like the different tones and like the leaves, you know, the different shades. I just love, you know, how it looks.
A lot of that came from EEVEE and the way it kind of does its subsurface scattering. It's not physically accurate, but it's interesting somehow.
And I love that the leaves on there are just, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, almost like a Photoshop brush.
Yeah.
And do they all angle towards the camera? Because they never look flat. You never kind of see that they're just a card. They look full.
So yeah, the leaves, shamefully, I think is one leaf texture for the whole film.
It works a treat.
So it's, yeah, a black and white mask in Photoshop instanced on like a lumpy sphere. And then it's angled towards the camera, but you can dial it so that the edges start to go back towards their original orientation. So they're not 100% facing the camera. And then I did a nasty trick with, in Photoshop, you know, you can have like an inner glow layer style.
Oh, yeah.
So I would like creep a bit of the white in at the edges and then use that in Blender to make a normal map. Even though they're flat planes, you can catch a little bit of rim light. Those flat cards were the only real way that I could figure out to keep the sort of just a little bit of a 2D sensibility to some of it. All the grass blades and flowers and all the little bits of foliage were all 2D.
Okay, brilliant. That's great to know. What's it like creating a short with no dialogue and relying on things like music, tone, eye expressions and performance? Because it portrays, you know, emotion, story all through just like eyes and beats, you know, they just get nailed really well. Was it always a conscious decision to have no dialogue in this?
There was a point where it was almost like a poem, like a voiceover. It was like the wind was a character and the tree was a character, and it was more like a duel between them. So yeah, it did have VO at one point, but I think this story just lends itself to more of a visual approach. I felt like I would add it if I needed it, and turned out not to need it. Also, just I'm not very good at organizing complicated machinery with lots of moving parts. So getting people in to do voiceovers was like, if it can be avoided, let's avoid it. And then you spoke about the music, which works so hard telling the story. If you watch it without the music, it's less than half the experience. So Max, who did the music, did such a good job of supporting the story, but also elevating the story and really bringing out the characters and the moments where it needed hammering home. Good job, Max.
Amazing. And you mentioned just about if you can avoid something and make your life a lot easier, then you should. I think many people do, you know.
Yeah, if you know something's going to be really time consuming and it's not critical to telling your story, swerve it, I guess.
Yeah.
And one of the best days I had on Deep Rooted, actually, I vividly remember I'd been struggling with this scene, and I'll share the animatic with you, which had this extra scene in it that was never really working, but it had a gag in it that I liked. And then one morning I woke up and had this like moment of clarity of thinking, if I delete that, and it was about 2 minutes, if I delete that completely, does it change the story at all? It didn't. So effectively I made 2 minutes of the film that day by just hoying it out the window. Yeah, it was such a good feeling. It was like, oh, I've figured out a secret like shortcut.
Did you stay in the animatic phase for long before you got into the 3D space? And what problems, like that one, what other problems did you kind of avoid?
The purpose of this was to kind of map out the main beats of the story and sort of figure out what assets I needed to make, what the pacing might feel like and stuff. So I showed it to a few people who I know have kind of got good instincts and won't be afraid to tell me something's crap if it is.
Like your daughter?
Yeah. Yeah. All the family members don't pull their punches, so that's a reliable kind of source. And it's, like I say, when it's when multiple people tell you the same thing, you know that's something you need to address. Like this is a good example with the season changing. I'd automatically got into my head that this would be some elaborate time lapse where a gradual transition would happen between. It took a long time on screen. It was like 30 seconds spent just going through that. And this was one of Erin's really good insights, I think, was she just said, well, just do a really hard cut and lean into that.
I love that. It was literally a frame, boom.
Yeah, and then accidentally stumbled on the idea of one element being continuous across those cuts. And I think that's probably one of the bits I think works best in the film. Again, just being part of a pretty ruthless cutting away of unnecessary stuff. And then, there's just a couple of scenes that didn't make it into the final bit. So those scenes lingered about longer than they should have done, really. But it feels good to cut it eventually. The animatic definitely forces you to kind of confront any glaring plot issues you've got, I think. And I'm always keen to move on from this process. I don't find it enjoyable because I can never really get down what's in my head. But it definitely pays off if you force yourself to stick with it.
Yeah. I remember in the final version, which I loved, which is one of my favourite shots, is where the vulture scrapes across the eyeball.
Yeah, he doesn't get the eyeball in this one. He gets like the frown.
Yeah, I loved the visual of that sliding across the eyeball.
Yeah, and it's got that windscreen wiper sound effect. Yeah.
Brilliant. There's a lot of animation and like extra bits layered onto this, and I think it seems like that's very helpful. Like you said, you want to get away from this, but there's something about staying in here just to solve some things out.
When I just draw like a placeholder for a scene, I never leave enough time in the edit for that shot. The only way I can reliably kind of allocate the right time for the shots is by adding in some of those details.
No, it makes complete sense. It's very helpful. How long was this animatic compared to the final?
That is 6 minutes 40. So yeah, after everything I've just said, I didn't allow enough time in the animatics for the shots because the final film's nearly 3 minutes longer than the animatic.
What about advice for people that want to make a short film in Blender? Top 3 tips.
All right. Make sure it's a film that you really want to make and that you really believe in what it is you're saying, because it's way easier to finish if you do that. If it's your first film or you're early in your kind of filmmaking career, don't enter it with the mindset that it's going to be the best thing you're ever going to make. Like, make 10 bad films. Don't be afraid of just making something and finishing it and then learn what you can from it and moving on to the next one. That's 2, right?
2. Have we got another one?
Yeah. I think it's easy to make something which is completely in your comfort zone, where you know how to do everything and it's well within what you can achieve. That's fine, but you're probably not going to grow as much. But at the same time, don't try and make something where you don't know how to do any of it yet. I think the sweet spot is a project where 90% or 80% of the tasks are things you're comfortable with and have some experience with, but there's 1 or 2 things that you know you're not quite up to it yet. So there's something to learn and there's a challenge involved. I think that if you can get the balance of that right, it's very rewarding. You'll grow as an artist, but you're not going to overwhelm yourself with like cognitive problems.
In 2025, if you was to give some advice to somebody wanting to start a freelance career in animation, have you got any do's and don'ts?
One of the most valuable skills you can try and equip yourself with is the ability to pivot and learn new things and broaden your skill set, really. I know we've been through a period where there's been a call for hyper specialists in various different areas, but I think more and more, like, we're seeing big studios closing all over the place, and I think there's going to be gaps in the market for little vendors who employ generalists and can kind of put small teams on projects. If you want to be employable across kind of a broad range of projects, it's all about just being able to slot in and fill whatever gaps there are in somebody's production needs. Even if you want to animate and what you're good at is animating and that's your focus, if you can supplement it with a little bit of rigging knowledge or a little bit of kind of problem solving ability, it'll just make you way more valuable to a team. And then I think one of the problems at the moment is just standing out. Like, the industry's gone through a lot of standardization, I think, and there's a danger that a lot of the show reels start to look similar and a little bit indistinguishable from each other because you can get high quality rigs for free. A lot of the animation principles are being taught in these kind of online schools and stuff, which is fantastic. And if you can find a way of doing something a little bit quirky, or I don't know, just something that gets you noticed. I can't imagine how hard it must be to get yourself noticed above, because there's so many good quality people now. Like, competence was much more subjective when I started out, and I think like expectations are really high now. So I guess it's about curating your work and showing the thing that says something about you rather than the thing that lumps you in with everybody else. And then just, be a person that people are happy to spend time with. That goes a long way. If someone has a good experience working with you, they're way more likely to ask you back. And I think especially as a freelancer, you're potentially going into numerous different studios in any given month. So yeah, if you can just be sociable to a certain extent. I mean, I'm not one to talk about this because I'm pretty introverted, but it goes a long way if you're just pleasant.
That's a great piece of advice. A lot of people do suffer with, imposter syndrome and am I good enough to even post my work on social media or apply for a particular role. Any advice for those people that are more introverted and don't really feel that they're good enough?
In my experience, the animation community and specifically the Blender community are generally really supportive. And I think if you're putting your stuff up in a kind of spirit of, this is what I've been working on, appreciate feedback and this, that and the other, I think in general, it's good to show stuff because there'll be people who will tell you what you can improve on, usually in a pretty constructive way. It definitely gets easier the more you do it. The flip side of that is to have an element of realism. Like, you do need to be able to look at your stuff against other people's stuff and go, do you know what, I'm not ready for that role yet. And this is the stuff I need to work on to get there. And ultimately, if you spend the time and you care about it, your skills will improve and you will get where you want to go.
Working on this project, Deep Rooted, you were juggling, obviously, family life and other projects, clients. How do you balance it? Can you give any advice to others?
In terms of family, it can be difficult, but the way I try and sort of circumvent that is to get them involved. I try not to close myself away in the office and with the do not disturb sign. I say, come here, look at this, and what do you think? And if they've got a good idea, I put it in, and that they're like that. It becomes a bit of a group project, I guess. At the same time, you don't want to be forcing it down the throats all the time. So
yeah, like family, everybody, after breakfast, we've got a daily session. Please bring your notepads every morning.
this is a cliche and I'm definitely guilty of not doing this myself, but I think the times when you're not working on the project and you're with the family is to try and really be with the family. That's my take on that. And then in terms of just carving out time, well, you've got to decide how important it is to you and what areas of your life can you kind of get rid of things that are less important or less beneficial to you. Things like social media is the obvious one, just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. I don't remember ever putting my phone down and thinking, I wish I'd spent longer doing that today. You know, I always think that is a waste of time. There's an awful lot of time available for me in that area. If I can cut that back, I can definitely make time for other stuff.
What are you working on next in terms of a personal project, if any?
There's a couple that I've started to thaw out of the freezer and explore. One of them is, it's like a little music video. It's a silly little song that I've written, but it's like a climate change type message, and I feel like that's worthy in itself of getting made. The other one is more ambitious. It's like similar length to Deep Rooted. It's more character driven in terms of there's dialogue and a script and a bit more of a plot. So that's going to involve a slightly bigger team. It will be more like a stop motion aesthetic to it.
Okay.
So hopefully feel like models. So it'll be a cycles job and it'll involve more rendering and all that stuff. But I like it. It's set in a 1920s Lancashire mill town, cobbled streets and all that stuff. So loads of geometry nodes.
Nice. Well, we'll look out for that, and I'm sure you'll be hopefully posting stuff along the way.
Yeah, definitely will be.
You mentioned expanding the team potentially. If Duncan was to take on a generalist, what kind of traits of that person would you look out for? You know, you mentioned earlier briefly about they've got to be nice to get on with, nice to work with, and any other kind of traits.
Yeah, but not too nice. I like it when people will fight their corner. So I like it when someone has something to say and they're not afraid to sort of stand by it and disagree with you. There's not enough just good conversations where you can appreciate each other's point of view and figure out like, oh, actually, you're right. I'll back off and we'll do it your way. So I think that's a good trait. Someone who'll bring like a point of view that they believe in. Just initiative really to kind of go, do you know what, there's a better way to do this, or I've hit a problem but I'm not gonna immediately throw my hands up and expect someone to come and fix it for me. Like I'll do a bit of digging and see if I can solve it myself.
Definitely, initiative's a great one. For everybody watching, please go and watch Deep Rooted. It is incredible. We've touched on it, I'd say briefly compared to probably what was involved. We loved it, and hence why Duncan's on. But yeah, please go and watch it. It's incredible.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, honestly. I really appreciate your time, as always.
No, it's great. Everyone's very generous with their time in the community, so it's a pleasure. I love talking about this stuff.
Amazing to meet you. I wish you all the best, and hopefully catch you on your next project when we do another episode and we talk about cycles and Blender and cobbles.
Yeah, 20 years time.
Amazing. Well, however long it takes, we wish you all the best with it, and we'll catch up soon, man.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Jamie.
Bye, Duncan.
Have a good one. See you later.